Hello and welcome back everybody to another Sunday night edition of the My Generation podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to the past few weeks of podcast content. I've really appreciated your listen. In this episode I'm answering a question that has been posed a few times on the show and indeed in real life as well. People asking me, what do I actually use to record the podcast? Because it's quite a nice setup we've got here. Really nice, really chill podcast setup, and in this episode I just wanted to sort of walk through how you could do this setup as well, because it's now one that I've been using since about end of March, early April time for released episodes. I'm actually still recording this episode in fairly early March. But the reason I wanted to do this is I've been trying to actually downsize the podcast as much as possible, and for some of the later episodes that you'll have heard sort of an end of June time, I've been trying to actually compact it again. So often when I try a new podcast setup, I will have a period where the size of the rig increases and then I downscale it again. So starting off with the sort of Blue Yeti that was used on the first couple of episodes, then that thing started to die and I had a Zoom H4 on the way, but it hadn't arrived by the time that the Blue Yeti finally died. So you heard a few episodes just done on the iPhone 10 that I've got, which is interesting. And this is sort of just a chronology of the podcast and microphone. So we started with the Blue Yeti, a few on the iPhone, and then they were recorded on the Zoom H4n for a little while, sort of up until, actually fairly recently, up until about sort of episode 22, I believe, maybe a little bit longer actually, with a couple of sprinkled in iPhone episodes where if I had a few problems with recording, because I was still sort of learning as I was going at the early days of the podcast. And then we move into the next period of the podcast where I got the Zoom H6, which is one of my favourite purchases of all time. It's one of my favourite bits of kit. It's worth its weight in gold. I've used it for so much stuff: paid work, the podcast, university work. I use it for everything. And the H6, well, what I initially did is, because I didn't have anything else, I just had the H6 for one person, the H4 for me, and then if I have multiple guests, I use the more directional microphone that comes with the H6 and then record it for multiple people, which I still do to this day at the moment. And once I invest in more of this sort of compact podcast system that I've got at the moment, then I'll be able to give a mic to each person. But I'm slowly building the podcast up because it's just a bit of fun, this show. So we're building kit as we go, as I can sort of put finance aside. As I know, very recently I also spoke about doing work with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K, what it was like using that camera, as I've been sort of rigging that out at the minute, and that's where a lot of my work has gone into. But the podcast is still here, still getting funding, and at the moment we're using the Rode NT1A to do these episodes with a very simple, very cheap pop filter. It's actually just sort of one of those sort of muffled little covers that you can get for like microphones. It just perfect. I think I've got about 20 of them for like £7. And it's not a perfect filter. Like, you can still sometimes hear pops, like you would have heard them probably. But I quite like the sound it generates. I don't like having a pop filter actually out in front of the mic. I think it sort of looks a bit uglier. You also have to set that. It's another thing to set up. Whereas I actually record my podcast in a lot of different places. Some at university, some at home, some get recorded actually out on location. So if you remember the episode I did with Joel, that episode was recorded on location. Sometimes the room at university I use is booked, so I have to go to other parts of the campus. I've done a couple episodes outside as well, so we've had a full range. And the reason why I've been trying to sort of compact my setup as much as possible is so that I can take it wherever I go, and the current podcast setup fits into just one rucksack, which I can take literally anywhere, which is just amazing for me. But yeah, so after the podcast setup I had sort of through till sort of about episodes 36, 37-ish, I was using Zoom H6 and the H4. This may give or take an episode. The exact chronology is a bit iffy for exact changes in the podcast microphones. But then the next step up from that was to this one, where I had two Rode NT1A microphones, one for me, one for the opposite guest. And they were both on microphone arms that were adjustable, and you could adjust them to your height as you needed. Really great. I still use one of them now because I've tried to compact it even further. So I am one of the Rode NT1As I had was sort of gifted to me, and I only had the microphone. I didn't have any of the extra stuff that came with it. But when I got my new one, it comes with a stand. Quite a small, compact little stand. It doesn't stand up on its own. You need to put it onto something. So I bought one of those little desktop mic stands that's only about sort of 15 centimeters tall, which just comes off the ground. That's what I'm using for this episode here. And that just works perfectly for me because the setup is so tiny and compact. I'll make sure that in tandem with this episode is a accompanying picture on the Facebook page so that you can see what this looks like. I'm trying to actually record a few different kit podcast episodes as we go. So I'm recording this in early March, as I'm building. I've just had a sort of a big wave of kit additions. So I've been trying to sort of review some of that because it's been really fun to use. And if there's any of the kits that I've mentioned that you want more detail on or a place to find to buy them, just let me know that that's something you want to see, and I can put that down in the comments if you so wish. But yeah, I've now gone to one mic arm for the guest because I think with a guest, I think they want to have a little bit more flexibility. They want to be able to move the microphone if it's too high, too low, whatever's comfortable for them. Some people like it quite close to them, some people like it pushed further away. And then for me, I'm pretty happy and chill with all setup, so I tend to use this sort of more smaller, compact setup. I'd actually like to have two of these. One for me, one for the guest, because it then means there's no eyeline obstruction. One of the things that I really missed from the very first edition of the shows when I first started this and just using the one single Blue Yeti to record two people, and then the ones on my iPhone, was that because the microphone was it was below eye level, it meant that people wouldn't even be thinking about it. So if I had someone who was quite nervous on, it really took the edge off, because it meant that sort of after a couple of minutes of speaking, you really get into it because you kind of just forget the mic's there. Whereas when you've got this sort of bigger, more in your face microphone arm, whilst it looks far more professional and the sound is really great, I think it can sometimes throw people who are a little bit more nervous. So I'm trying to find this happy medium where I've got a professional looking setup here, but it's also quite compact and easier to travel with. So I'm now, I've gone for the upscale, I've gone for the microphone arms, and now I'm trying to downscale it again. So I think what I'm going to do is buy more of these covers for the microphone, the ones that come with the Rode NT1A when you buy one, and buy a few more of those at Rode NT1As, because the Zoom H6 has 4 XLR ports, and I would potentially be looking to upgrade it if I was having more guests. So, because if I have, in my current setup, I can only really do to this audio quality 2 people, but if I wanted to do more than that, I would have to use the Rode the Zoom H6, which powers this podcast. It's the vehicle that allows me to use the Rode NT1A, but I can only use 2 at the moment, one for me, one for the guest, because I only have 2 mics, or I use the actual H6 as a recorder and one that goes into my current mic, and in that way I can then record more people. I appreciate this episode's a little bit technical, I do apologize, and I hope I'm making some sense to you, but if not, I do post pictures of all of the features and the different microphones I use, so when you see each episode there's usually a slight difference in setup, but yeah, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible at the minute. One mic stand, the one that the Rode NT1A comes with, because it's quite springy, so if I'm touching or moving it, or I knock it, like I've done it a couple times in this episode and it hasn't made a sound because it's got elastic on it, so it's just kind of holding itself in place there. And if it's too awkward a height, I can just sort of bring the legs up on the little stand, which means it's all nice and easy to use. And the desktop stand isn't one of those ones that's like a circle and then comes straight up out the middle. It has got legs, so I can actually move it, and it can support the weight of the tripod, of the microphone, which is really handy. And then I just use an XLR cable that runs from the microphone, the Rode NT1A, into the Zoom H6. So if you are on a budget and you wanted to make this setup, really the two things you're going to need to buy are the few things you're going to need to buy is, I'd recommend a Zoom H4n, because that's the one I originally used, and it's cheaper than the H6, and it's got XLR ports, which is all you really need to get going from the beginning. So if you are struggling at the start to sort of finance this, the Rode H4 is going to be a better option. And if you can find cheaper alternatives that have XLR ports, even better. Then you're going to want an XLR cable. The Rode NT1A actually comes with an XLR cable in the bag, which is really handy. So you don't even need to go out and buy one of those. And then it comes with the actual mic kit, but then and the accompanying sort of bit that you hold it in, but you do actually have to buy an additional little tripod for it, or desktop stand of something. It doesn't take like traditional screw threads. It's not the same ones that come on cameras. It's a different fit. But yeah, look up the screw thread for it and make sure you're buying the right one, because a basic Gorilla Pod won't work. And then make sure once you've got all those set up, that's really all you need to start. A recorder to power the to power your microphone, the microphone itself, and then a little bit extra. So that's all you need to start a podcast, really, with really high audio quality really quickly. And this is a setup that thoroughly works for me, and I hope you're enjoying the sound quality of the show. I definitely plan on upgrading it when I plan on moving on to higher numbers of guests, which is something I definitely want to do. I want to feature, say, 6 or 8 people on one show. That would be great. I know in and around the ballpark of releasing this, I've done an episode with Connor Jenkins, Dungeons and Dragons Society one. I know for that episode, I'm going to have to use the H6's sort of wider dynamic capture pool for its second microphone attachment it comes with for the actual microphone. So instead of powering something through it, I'm just using the H6 for the guests. It just means the voices sound a little bit distant, but it's still very clear, very audible, very good quality sound. It's just it feels further away, which is and there's nothing I can do about that currently, but basically just build up my setups on this microphone. Another great thing about the Rode NT1A when you get it, also none of this is sponsored, by the way, just want to let you know I've bought all this stuff, or in the case of this one Rode NT1A, had it gifted to me, but the other one I've paid with my real money. It's not sponsored at all, it's just this is the option that I like the most, and for use of it, you also get a pop filter. So if you haven't got little microphone covers, you can go out and just use the pop filter to start with. It's just not my preferred choice, just because of how you have to screw it on, and it's a bit awkward to screw on, and it doesn't look too great, just to me. I know a lot of people love using pop filters. I think that the filtration doesn't really work for me, and the shape of it, they can fall sometimes. I think my one's a little bit damaged. I don't think that's I don't know, just from one way it's sort of quite loose with how it twists, but that's sort of another issue of itself. But it's a good setup, and I would thoroughly recommend experimenting though if this is what you're looking to do, if it's podcasting. Whereas if what you're wanting to do is maybe sort of like if you're thinking about this kind of stuff is like interviewing people, but like you're going to be transcribing those interviews, it's probably like a dictaphone you want or something, or like a Zoom H4n, because they're cheaper and they're more discreet, and if they're not actually no one's actually going to be hearing this audio and it's just going to be written, you probably get a little bit more of a truer interview because it feels like there's no microphone there at all. But that's sort of the vibe I'm trying to get by, because with this setup I've got at the minute, the microphone sits just below my mouth, so you don't hear like all the little noises, but yeah, I've got it at this level, so it's just a perfect amount, and it's not obstructing my eye line. It's barely in it at all. So if I look straight forward, and I'm recording this episode at home, I'm not even in a soundproofed room. The setup we've got at university, it's a lot more soundproof, but because I can get really close to this microphone, and I'm right in front of it, I can really drop my level down on the handy recorder, the Zoom H6, because it's all really close up and personal. The only thing that I would want to improve with this podcast setup is there's a little bit on the S sound that doesn't sound quite nice on this microphone. You've probably picked up on it through listening through this quality. I hope it hasn't bothered you. I aim to fix that and try and keep it out of post-processing, because I used to, with the old episodes that I would do on the Blue Yeti or on the iPhone, I would have to add bass boosts, do loads of noise removing, which would take a lot of time and often didn't really reach a high enough standard, whereas this requires a lot less post-production, which means I can get episodes out faster, but still to a really high quality. It doesn't feel like I'm rushing them, which is very important, I think, because I want to be able to manage this. And now that obviously we've moved quite regularly into a bi-weekly show here, it's now up and running. We've got guest music, Sammy Bacon music feature, and Harry's film reviews every single Thursday. And then every Sunday it's just me and you having a chat, and it's either an anecdote, a film review. And I'm quite liking introducing the topic of talking about kit. If there's a specific bit of kit you want more info on, I can do that in the comments below. Or if there's any film kit, I've just got kit in my hand that I'm sort of playing with as I talk at the minute, the ones that I talked about in the film video. And I always forget how much the Mickey Cine Prime lens I've got weighs. It's a heavy lens. Another thing I'll say about audio is it's far cheaper than video. The body of the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema I've got is more expensive than my entire podcast setup, which is just a testament to how much more affordable audio is as a medium. And there's a lot more experimenting you can do. I think sound is like an underrated medium. Radio is still very popular. Podcasts are booming at the moment, but I think as a general trend, there could be a lot more happening for audio, and I think it deserves its time. I'm a university student, and we're studying a lot about sound at the minute, and we learned a lot today about the film Gravity and about how it positioned sounds for speakers, and how like dialogue feels like it's coming all around you, and based on where like the position of Earth is, there are certain sounds you hear. And also because you can't hear sound in space, what it did with like vibrations as sounds, as opposed to actually just doing regular sound effects, trying to sort of be more true to what actual sound would feel like in space. It would feel like a vibration, which was really interesting to me. And I plan to explore, the variety that sound offers in more detail in future episodes, because it's thoroughly interesting to me, and I hope it is to you. As to why you've clicked on this episode. You've probably clicked on more to hear about podcasting, and I've rambled about film theory, but this is what happens on the show. I appreciate you tuning in with me this week. I know that the Sunday evening edition tends to be shorter than the more fleshed out editions on a Thursday. I'm recording this sort of early on in March, or sort of mid-March actually. But with the sort of the coronavirus outbreak at the moment, it means that some of my episodes in and around this that feature guests may be done via Skype instead. I appreciate that you're hearing this a lot further down the line, but that's just a pre-warning to let you know, because I pre-record these episodes quite far in advance, because with university work sometimes I'm unable to bring brand new episodes out all the time, so I try and make sure that you've always got a new episode every Thursday. And as of this great summer of podcasting, that you've had a Sunday night edition as well, because I've really enjoyed bringing these episodes to you. But the episodes in and around this, there may be a difference. I think my microphone audio quality should stay the same, but just a warning for future Thursday episodes that some of them may be done via Skype due to this. But I hope that's all good with you. Still thoroughly interesting guests that are coming up on the show. Very much appreciated to have you on with me today, talking one-to-one about my podcast setup. And actually using Skype as a podcast medium, it's been working wonders for people I haven't been able to speak to before. I know we had I interviewed Kieran like way back in, I think, January or February, and it was my first time podcasting on Skype. He told me about it, and it came out really, really good. Having because our schedules just could not line up for us to both be in the same room to do a podcast, but it just worked to get it done, and it sounded really good, and he's a very interesting guest, and we've got very interesting guests coming up on the show. I just hope you're able to bear with on some of the sound quality for some of those, but thank you very much for that. And I look forward to tuning in with you and having a chat further with a guest featuring a local Kent band, Sammy Bacon, Harry's Film Reviews, and more. This coming Thursday on the My Generation podcast.